"You're no longer the owner of this house," my daughter-in-law sneered, blocking the doorway like I was a stranger. I'd driven hours through a snowstorm, expecting family warmth, only to find strangers eating in the cabin my late wife and I built with our own hands. My heart sank, but behind my silence I started calculating every move. They thought I was just a confused old man, powerless to fight back. But they were wrong, and they were about to learn the cost of betrayal. That was the moment I stepped inside, ready to set a plan in motion no one would see coming. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. My name is Augustus Whitmore, and at 68 years old, I thought I'd seen everything during my 40 years as a firefighter in Denver. I'd pulled people from burning buildings, held dying strangers in my arms, and faced down flames that would terrify most men. But nothing had prepared me for this moment, standing in the Colorado snow, being treated like an unwelcome intruder at my own front door. It was Thanksgiving weekend, the time of year when I always came to my mountain cabin to remember my late wife, Margaret. She'd loved this place more than anywhere else on earth. We'd built it together, log by log, dream by dream, back when we were young and believed family meant something sacred. But now Vivienne, my son Jasper's wife, stood in the doorway, wearing one of Margaret's aprons, her perfectly manicured nails gripping the door frame like claws. Her blonde hair was styled in that expensive way that screamed money, and her lips were twisted into a sneer that made my blood run cold. "Vivienne," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "This is my cabin. I come here every Thanksgiving weekend. You know that." She laughed a sound like breaking glass. "Your cabin. Oh, Augustus, you're so confused. This is a business now. A real business that actually makes money instead of sitting empty 11 months out of the year." Behind her, I could see at least 6 strangers scattered throughout my living room. A couple in their 30s sat on my leather couch, the one Margaret and I had saved for 3 years to buy. They were eating takeout from expensive containers, dropping crumbs on the hand-woven rug Margaret had made during her final winter. A group of college-aged kids occupied my kitchen, their beer bottles covering the wooden table I'd built with my own hands. They were loud, entitled, treating my home like a party house. One of them had his muddy boots propped up on my coffee table, the same table where Margaret used to place her morning coffee and watch the sunrise through our picture window. "These people are guests," Vivienne continued, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Paying guests, $300 a night to be exact. They've booked the cabin through Christmas, so I'm afraid there's simply no room for unexpected visitors." Unexpected visitors. In my own home, I felt something crack inside my chest, like ice breaking on a frozen lake. "Vivienne, I don't understand. This cabin belongs to me. I have the deed. I pay the property taxes. I built this place with Margaret before you were even born." "Oh, Augustus," she sighed dramatically, pulling a folded paper from her pocket. "I was hoping we wouldn't have to do this the hard way, but you're clearly having one of your episodes again." She unfolded the document and held it up like a weapon. Even from where I stood, I could see official-looking letterhead and signatures. "This is a power of attorney signed by your doctor stating that you're in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease and are no longer competent to manage your financial affairs. Jasper and I are now legally responsible for all your properties, including this cabin." The words hit me like a physical blow. Alzheimer's. I'd never been diagnosed with anything of the sort. My mind was as sharp as it had ever been. I could remember every fire I'd fought, every life I'd saved, every anniversary dinner Margaret and I had shared in this very cabin. "That's impossible," I said, stepping forward. "I've never been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I've never even seen a doctor about memory problems." Vivienne's smile grew wider, more predatory. "Oh, but you have Augustus. Dr. Harrison at the Pine Ridge Clinic. Lovely man, very understanding about the needs of elderly patients and their families." One of the guests, a woman in her 40s wearing designer ski clothes, approached the door with an annoyed expression. "Excuse me, is there a problem here? We paid good money for a quiet mountain getaway, and this disturbance is really unacceptable." Vivienne turned to her with an apologetic smile. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Peterson. This is just the previous owner. He gets confused sometimes and thinks he still lives here. Don't worry, I'll handle this." Previous owner. The words echoed in my head like gunshots. I looked past Vivienne into my living room, and that's when I saw something that made my heart stop completely. There, hanging above my fireplace where Margaret's portrait used to be, was a large sign that read, "Welcome to Pine Peak Retreat, your home away from home." My wife's portrait, the last professional photo we'd taken together before the cancer took her, was nowhere to be seen. The sight of that Airbnb sign where Margaret's portrait should have been sent a surge of rage through my veins that I hadn't felt since my firefighting days. But 40 years of emergency response had taught me one crucial lesson: never let emotion override strategy. I needed to see exactly what Vivienne had done to my home before I could figure out how to fight back. "I need to use the restroom," I said quietly, pushing past Vivienne before she could object. "Make it quick," she snapped. "Our guests don't need to be disturbed by family drama." As I walked through my own living room, I felt like a ghost haunting his former life. Every corner held evidence of Vivienne's transformation of my sacred space into a commercial venture. Professional photographs of the cabin's exterior were mounted on the walls, complete with marketing slogans like "rustic luxury in the heart of Colorado" and "five-star mountain experience." The college kids in my kitchen barely glanced up as I passed. One of them, a young man with expensive ski gear draped over my dining chairs, was complaining loudly into his phone. "Yeah, Mom, the Wi-Fi is decent, but there's no hot tub like the listing promised. For $300 a night, you'd think they'd have better amenities." $300 a night. That meant Vivienne was pulling in over $2,000 a week from my cabin. During peak season, she could be making $10,000 a month from my property, while I lived in my modest apartment in Denver, carefully budgeting my firefighter's pension. I made my way upstairs, my heart pounding with each step. The master bedroom, where Margaret and I had spent countless peaceful mornings watching the sunrise, was occupied by the couple I'd seen on my couch. Their designer luggage was scattered across the floor, and they'd left wet towels on Margaret's antique cedar chest. But it was what I found in the guest bedroom that made my hands shake with fury. Vivienne had converted it into a makeshift office, complete with a laptop printer and filing cabinet. The walls were covered with printed emails, booking confirmations, and what looked like financial spreadsheets. I moved closer to the desk, my firefighter training kicking in. In emergencies, you learn to process information quickly to spot the crucial details that others might miss. What I saw made my stomach drop. The laptop screen was still open to the Airbnb listing for Pine Peak Retreat. The photos showed my cabin in perfect detail, but the description made me sick. "Charming family cabin available year-round. Recently inherited property managed by local family business. Perfect for romantic getaways, family reunions, and corporate retreats. Recently inherited." As if I were already dead. The guest reviews were glowing, dating back 6 months. 6 months. Vivienne had been running this illegal business in my cabin for half a year without my knowledge. The comments praised the authentic mountain experience and attention to detail by the wonderful host family. But it was the financial spreadsheet that truly revealed the scope of her operation. Column after column of dates, guest names, and payments. My rough calculation showed she'd already made over $30,000 from my property. I opened the filing cabinet with trembling hands. Inside were folders labeled bookings, expenses, and legal documents. The legal folder made my blood run cold. Along with the forged power of attorney, Vivienne had shown me there were bank statements from accounts I'd never opened, all in my name. The statements showed regular deposits from Airbnb, but also withdrawals for things like cabin improvements, marketing expenses, and management fees. Vivienne hadn't just been stealing rental income from my property. She'd been using my identity to open bank accounts and funnel money through them. At the bottom of the folder was a document that made my vision blur with rage. It was a real estate appraisal for my cabin dated just 2 weeks ago. The estimated value $450,000. Attached was a handwritten note in Vivienne's precise script. "Jay agrees sale makes sense. Old man won't last much longer anyway. Can use proceeds for down payment on Denver house." They weren't just stealing my rental income. They were planning to sell my cabin, the home I'd built with my dying wife, and use the money to upgrade their own lifestyle. I heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly closed the filing cabinet. Vivienne appeared in the doorway, her expression suspicious. "What are you doing up here, Augustus? I told you to use the downstairs bathroom." "I was looking for Margaret's portrait," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "The one that used to hang over the fireplace." Her laugh was cold and dismissive. "Oh, that old thing. It didn't fit with the cabin's new aesthetic. Our guests prefer a more neutral, welcoming environment. I donated it to Goodwill months ago." Margaret's portrait. The last professional photo of my beloved wife donated to a thrift store like unwanted furniture. Something inside me snapped. Not the explosive anger that leads to mistakes, but the cold, calculated fury that had made me one of Denver's most effective firefighters. Vivienne had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She thought she was dealing with a confused old man who could be intimidated and pushed around. She had no idea she'd just declared war on someone who'd spent 4 decades running toward danger when everyone else ran away. I was still standing in that makeshift office, staring at the empty space where my wife's memory had been erased when I heard a familiar voice downstairs. My heart leaped with hope for the first time since this nightmare began. "Dad, Dad, are you here, Jasper?" My son had finally arrived. I rushed downstairs, expecting to see the relief in his eyes, expecting him to demand an explanation from his wife about what she'd done to our family cabin. Instead, I found him in the living room, casually greeting the Airbnb guests as if they belonged there. "Sorry about the confusion, folks," he was saying to the college kids. "My father sometimes gets a little disoriented. We're handling the situation." Disoriented. My own son was apologizing to strangers for my presence in my own home. "Jasper," I said, my voice carrying the authority I'd used to command respect at fire scenes. "We need to talk. Now." He turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. It wasn't the warm smile of the boy I'd raised alone after Margaret died. It wasn't even the polite distance of our recent years. It was something colder, something that made my chest tighten with dread. "Dad, what are you doing here? Vivian told me you'd been having episodes lately. You can't just show up at properties that are being actively managed." Properties being actively managed. He was talking about my cabin like it was some corporate asset. "Jasper, this is my home. Your mother and I built this place with our own hands. You helped us choose the logs for the walls when you were 16 years old. Remember, for just a moment I saw a flicker of the boy I'd raised. The kid who'd spent summers here learning to fish, who'd brought his first girlfriend here to meet Margaret, who'd cried in my arms on this very porch the night his mother died." But Vivienne appeared beside him, slipping her arm through his like a snake coiling around its prey. "Honey," she said softly, "remember what Dr. Harrison told us. Alzheimer's patients often have vivid memories of the past, but can't process current reality. It's not his fault." "I don't have Alzheimer's," I said firmly, looking directly at my son. "Jasper, you know me better than anyone. Have I shown any signs of memory loss? Any confusion? Any inability to manage my affairs?" My son looked away, unable to meet my eyes. That's when I knew the truth hit me like a physical blow. "You knew," I whispered. "You knew about the forged documents. You knew about the illegal Airbnb business. You knew about everything." "Dad, it's not that simple," Jasper said, his voice defensive. "You live alone in that tiny apartment. You barely use this place anymore. It was just sitting here empty while Vivian and I are drowning in mortgage payments and student loans for the kids. So you decided to steal from me." "We're not stealing," Vivian snapped. "We're managing your assets responsibly. Do you have any idea how much money you're wasting by letting this place sit empty? 11 months a year." I stared at my son, remembering all the sacrifices I'd made for him. Working double shifts at the fire station to pay for his college. Taking out a second mortgage on my Denver house to help him with his wedding. Babysitting his children every weekend, so he and Vivian could have date nights. "Jasper," I said quietly, "do you remember what I taught you about integrity when you were young?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, this isn't about integrity. This is about practical financial management. I taught you that a man's word is his bond, that family takes care of family, that you never ever betray the people who love you." "We're not betraying you," he exploded, his face flushing red. "We're trying to help you. You're 70 years old, Dad. You can't keep managing properties and finances like you're still 30. The responsible thing is to let your family help you, by forging medical documents, by stealing my rental income, by planning to sell my home without my knowledge." Jasper's face went white. He glanced at Vivienne, who was glaring at me with pure hatred. "How did you?" he started. "I saw the real estate appraisal, son. I saw the note about using the proceeds for your down payment. I saw everything." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the Airbnb guests had stopped their conversations to listen to our family drama unfold. "Dad," Jasper said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, "we have 3 kids. The mortgage is killing us. Vivienne's student loans are crushing us. When we saw how much money this place could generate, it seemed like the perfect solution. The perfect solution was to ask me for help, like family does." "You would have said no," Vivienne interjected. "You're so attached to this place, so stuck in the past with your dead wife's memory. You would never have agreed to anything practical." The mention of Margaret in such dismissive terms sent a surge of protective rage through me that I hadn't felt since the night she died. "My dead wife," I repeated slowly, "built this cabin with me as our dream retirement home. She planted every flower in that garden. She chose every piece of furniture. She died, believing this place would be our legacy for our family. And it can be, Jasper said desperately. But it can also be profitable. Dad, we're not trying to hurt you. We're trying to secure everyone's future. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised to be honest and strong, and saw a stranger. Someone who could justify theft as financial planning, betrayal as family assistance. Jasper, I said, my voice carrying the finality of a closing door. You had a choice to make. You could have come to me as a son asking his father for help. Instead, you chose to conspire with your wife to steal from me using forged documents. Dad, please, you made your choice, son. Now I'll make mine. I turned and walked toward the door, but Vivian's voice stopped me cold. Where do you think you're going, Augustus? This is a managed property now. You can't just come and go as you please. I turned back to face her, and for the first time since this ordeal began, I smiled. Vivian, you've made two critical mistakes. First, you assumed I was a helpless old man who couldn't fight back. Second, you forgot that I spent 40 years dealing with people who thought they could break the law without consequences. Her confident expression faltered slightly. I'm going to make some phone calls, I continued, and by tomorrow morning you're going to discover exactly what happens when you try to steal from a man who spent his entire career saving people from disasters. You can't prove anything, she said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. Can't I? I have photographs of your illegal business operation, copies of forged documents, evidence of identity theft, and bank records showing systematic fraud. But most importantly, I have something you clearly don't understand. What's that? Jasper asked quietly. I have nothing left to lose, son, and that makes me very, very dangerous. I drove through the snowy mountain roads with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles had turned white. The Pine Valley Inn, a modest hotel 15 miles down the mountain, became my temporary command center. For $37 a night, I had a clean room with Wi-Fi and a phone line. More importantly, I had privacy to plan my counterattack. My firefighter training had taught me that successful emergency response depends on three things: accurate information, proper resources, and decisive action. Vivian and Jasper had made the mistake of thinking I was just an emotional old man acting on impulse. They were about to learn I was a tactical strategist with 4 decades of crisis management experience. I spread the photographs I'd taken of Vivian's documents across the hotel room's small desk. In the harsh fluorescent light, the evidence of their fraud was even more damning than I'd realized. The bank statements showed a sophisticated operation. Vivian hadn't just opened one illegal account in my name. She'd opened 3 separate accounts at different banks, all using forged signatures and fake identification documents. The Airbnb income was being deposited into the first account, then transferred in smaller amounts to the other 2 to avoid detection. But the outgoing expenses revealed the true scope of her theft. Beyond the obvious Airbnb business costs, she'd been using my identity to finance her family's lifestyle. Credit card payments for expensive restaurants, department store purchases, even payments to a private school for her children. My name was attached to thousands of dollars in debt I'd never authorized. I pulled out my own laptop and began cross-referencing the dates on her financial records with my personal calendar. The pattern that emerged made my blood boil. Every time I'd mentioned planning a trip to the cabin, Vivian had canceled guest bookings for those exact dates. She'd been monitoring my schedule, using my own family communications against me to maximize her illegal profits. The real estate appraisal was dated just 2 weeks ago, but attached emails showed she'd been planning the sale for months. She'd contacted 3 different real estate agents, shopping for the one who would ask the fewest questions about an elderly owner who might be confused about the transaction. I picked up the hotel phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Denver Fire Department, Captain Rodriguez speaking. Miguel, it's Augustus Whitmore. Gus, how the hell are you, old man? Haven't heard from you since the retirement party. Miguel Rodriguez had been my lieutenant for 15 years before earning his own command. More importantly, his brother Carlos was a detective with the Denver Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. Miguel, I need a favor. A big one. Name it. You saved my ass more times than I can count. I explained the situation in the clinical factual tone we'd used for incident reports. No emotion, just facts and evidence. Miguel listened without interruption, occasionally asking for clarification on technical details. Jesus, Gus, your own family did this to you. My daughter-in-law orchestrated it. My son chose to go along with it. You want me to call Carlos? Not yet. I need to document everything properly first. But I want you to know what's happening in case I need backup. You got it, brother. And Gus, I'm sorry this is happening to you. Margaret would be furious. The mention of my wife's name brought tears to my eyes for the first time since this ordeal began. She would be, wouldn't she? After hanging up, I called my bank in Denver. Patricia Williams had been my account manager for 12 years, and she knew my financial habits better than anyone. Mr. Whitmore, how can I help you today, Patricia? I need you to check something for me. Have there been any attempts to access my accounts or open new accounts in my name in the past year? I heard typing on her keyboard. Let me check our security logs. Oh my. Mr. Whitmore, there have been several inquiries about your accounts from someone claiming to be your power of attorney. We denied access because we don't have any power of attorney documents on file for you. What kind of inquiries, account balances, transaction histories, and requests for new account applications? The most recent was just last week. My heart pounded. Vivian had been trying to access my main accounts too, not just the fraudulent ones she'd created. Patricia, I need you to put a fraud alert on all my accounts immediately. Someone has been impersonating me and opening unauthorized accounts. Of course, sir. I'll also generate a complete report of all suspicious activity for you to review. Can you email that to me within the hour? Absolutely. Mr. Whitmore, do you need us to contact the authorities? I'm handling that myself. But thank you. My next call was to Dr. Harrison at Pine Ridge Clinic, the physician who'd supposedly diagnosed me with Alzheimer's. The receptionist was helpful but confused. I'm sorry, Mr. Whitmore, but we don't have any records of you as a patient. Dr. Harrison has never examined anyone by that name. Can you check if someone has requested medical records or documentation in my name? Let me ask Dr. Harrison directly. After a brief hold, she returned with information that made my hands shake with rage. Dr. Harrison says a woman called last month claiming to be your daughter. She said you were too embarrassed to seek treatment for memory problems and asked if he could provide a general assessment form for family members to help with elder care decisions. He refused and told her that's not how medical diagnoses work. Did she give a name? She said her name was Vivian Whitmore. So Vivian had tried to get legitimate medical documentation to support her fraud, and when that failed, she'd simply forged it herself. By 10 o'clock that night, I had assembled a comprehensive case file. Bank fraud, identity theft, forgery of medical documents, illegal business operation on my property, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. Each crime carried serious penalties, and together they painted a picture of systematic elder abuse that would horrify any prosecutor. But the most damaging evidence was something Vivian couldn't have anticipated. My firefighter pension included legal insurance, and I'd maintained relationships with some of the best attorneys in Colorado through the Firefighters Union. I dialed the number for Thomas Mitchell, a lawyer who'd represented the fire department in several high-profile cases. Tom, it's Augustus Whitmore. I need your help with a family matter that's turned criminal. Gus, good to hear from you. What's going on? I explained the situation in detail, emailing him photographs of documents as we talked. This is serious stuff, Gus. We're talking about multiple felonies here. Your daughter-in-law could be looking at 5 to 10 years in prison. What about my son? If he signed any of the fraudulent documents or actively participated in the scheme, he's looking at conspiracy charges. Even if he was just passively aware, he could face charges as an accessory. Tom, I want them prosecuted to the full extent of the law. No family considerations, no plea bargains that let them walk away with a slap on the wrist. Are you sure once we start this process, there's no going back? Your relationship with your son will be permanently destroyed. I thought about Jasper's words earlier that day, his casual dismissal of my rights, his willingness to justify theft as financial planning. Tom, my relationship with my son was destroyed the moment he chose to steal from me rather than ask for help. Now I want justice. All right then. Meet me at my office tomorrow morning at 9. We'll file everything and have them served by noon. As I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The calm, focused determination that had carried me through thousands of emergency calls. Vivian and Jasper thought they were dealing with a confused old man who would eventually give up and accept their version of reality. Tomorrow they would discover they'd picked a fight with someone who'd spent his entire career running toward danger when everyone else ran away. Thomas Mitchell's law office occupied the entire 15th floor of a glass tower in downtown Denver. At exactly 9 o'clock the next morning, I sat across from him in a conference room that overlooked the Rocky Mountains. The same mountains where my cabin sat, where my family was continuing their illegal operation, blissfully unaware that their world was about to collapse. Tom was younger than me by about 10 years, but his reputation in Colorado legal circles was legendary. He'd built his career defending firefighters, police officers, and other public servants against false accusations and legal attacks. Now he was about to use those same skills to prosecute my own family. "Gus, I've reviewed all the documentation you sent me last night," he said, spreading my evidence across the polished conference table. "This is one of the most comprehensive elder abuse cases I've ever seen. Your daughter-in-law didn't just commit fraud. She orchestrated a systematic campaign to strip you of your assets and legal rights." He pointed to the forged power of attorney. "This document alone carries a penalty of up to 5 years in prison. But combined with the identity theft, bank fraud, and illegal business operation, we're looking at federal charges that could put her away for decades." "What about Jasper?" Tom's expression grew serious. "Your son's involvement makes this more complicated. If he signed any of the bank documents or actively participated in opening the fraudulent accounts, he's looking at the same charges as his wife. Even if he was just aware of the scheme and didn't report it, that's conspiracy." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the same feeling I'd had 40 years ago when I'd first run into a burning building. Fear, mixed with determination, knowing that what came next would change everything forever. "Tom, I want you to understand something. 40 years ago, I took an oath to protect people from harm, even when it meant risking my own life. Today, I'm taking a different kind of oath. I will not allow my family to steal my life's work and get away with it." He nodded with respect. "Then, let's make sure they don't. Here's what we're going to do." Tom pulled out a legal pad and began outlining our strategy with the precision of a military operation. "First, we file for immediate injunctive relief to stop all Airbnb operations at your property. Since you're the legal owner and never authorized any commercial use, this should be granted within hours." "What does that mean for the current guests?" "They'll have to leave immediately. Your daughter-in-law will be responsible for refunding their money and dealing with the cancellations. More importantly, she'll lose all future booking revenue." The thought of Vivienne having to face angry guests and financial losses brought me a grim satisfaction. "Second," Tom continued, "we file criminal complaints with both the Denver District Attorney and the FBI. The bank fraud crosses state lines, which makes it a federal crime. We're also requesting immediate asset freezes on all accounts opened in your name." "How long will that take?" "The asset freezes should happen today. The criminal investigation will take longer, but with this much evidence, I expect arrests within a week." Tom flipped to a new page on his legal pad. "Third, we file a civil lawsuit for damages. Beyond recovering the money she stole, we're going to seek punitive damages for emotional distress, property damage, and the cost of restoring your credit and reputation." "How much are we talking about?" "Conservative estimate, $200,000. But I think we can get more, especially if we can prove she was planning to sell your property without your consent." The number stunned me. I'd known Vivienne had stolen money, but I hadn't calculated the full financial impact of her crimes. "Tom, there's something else. I want this case to be public. I want everyone in their social circle to know exactly what they did." He smiled grimly. "Court records are public documents. And given the unusual nature of this case, I suspect the media will be very interested. Elder abuse by family members is a hot topic right now." "Good. I want their friends, their neighbors, their children's teachers to know that Vivienne and Jasper Whitmore are thieves who steal from elderly family members." Tom made notes on his pad. "I can arrange for press releases to be sent to local news stations and newspapers. The story has all the elements that journalists love: family betrayal, elder abuse, and a victim who fights back." "What about my cabin? Can I get it back today?" "Absolutely. Since you're the legal owner and can prove the Airbnb operation was unauthorized, we can get a court order for immediate possession. I'll have a sheriff accompany you to ensure there's no trouble." The thought of returning to my cabin with legal authority behind me sent a surge of anticipation through my veins. "There's one more thing," Tom said, his voice growing serious. "Once we file these charges, your relationship with your son will be permanently destroyed. He'll face criminal prosecution, financial ruin, and public humiliation. His children will grow up knowing their father is a convicted felon. Are you absolutely certain this is what you want?" I thought about Jasper as a little boy helping me build the cabin, learning to use tools, proud to work alongside his father. I thought about him as a teenager, bringing his problems to me, trusting me to help him navigate the challenges of growing up. I thought about him as a young man walking down the aisle at his wedding, introducing me to his children as their grandfather. Then I thought about him yesterday standing in my living room justifying theft as financial planning, dismissing my rights as the confusion of an old man. Tom, my son, made his choice when he decided to steal from me rather than ask for help. I'm simply making sure there are consequences for that choice. All right then, let's destroy them. For the next 2 hours, we prepared and filed a comprehensive legal assault that would hit Vivienne and Jasper from multiple directions simultaneously. Injunctive relief to stop their illegal business, criminal complaints for fraud and identity theft, civil lawsuits for damages and emotional distress, asset freezes to prevent them from hiding their stolen money. By noon, Tom's assistant had filed all the paperwork with the court. By 1 o'clock, we had judicial approval for immediate action. By 2 o'clock, Sheriff Martinez was waiting in the parking lot with court orders that would give me back my cabin and my dignity. Ready for this, Gus? Tom asked as we walked toward the sheriff's car. I looked up at the mountains, thinking about Margaret, thinking about the cabin we'd built together, thinking about the justice that was finally coming. Tom, I've been ready for this my entire life. Let's go get my home back. The caravan that pulled into my cabin's driveway at 3 o'clock that afternoon looked like a scene from a legal drama. Sheriff Martinez led the way in his patrol car, followed by Tom Mitchell in his BMW, a court clerk in a county vehicle, and me in my old pickup truck. Behind us came a locksmith and a local news crew that Tom had tipped off about the unprecedented elder abuse case. I felt like a general returning to reclaim occupied territory, backed by the full authority of Colorado law. Vivienne must have seen us coming because she was already standing on the porch when we parked, her face pale with what looked like genuine fear for the first time since this nightmare began. The Airbnb guests were scattered around the property, some loading luggage into their cars with confused expressions, others standing around with their phones out, recording everything. Sheriff Martinez approached the porch with the measured authority of a man who'd served legal papers thousands of times. "Ma'am, I'm Sheriff Martinez with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department. Are you Vivienne Whitmore?" "Yes, but I don't understand what this is about," she said, her voice shaking. "Ma'am, I have a court order for immediate cessation of all commercial activities on this property, as well as an order for immediate possession to be returned to the legal owner, Augustus Whitmore." He handed her the papers with official seals and judicial signatures. I watched her face change as she read them, the color draining from her cheeks as the reality of her situation became clear. "This is impossible," she whispered. "We have legal authority to manage this property. Augustus has Alzheimer's. He can't make these kinds of decisions." Tom stepped forward with his briefcase. "Ma'am, I'm Thomas Mitchell, attorney for Mr. Whitmore. The power of attorney you've been using is fraudulent. We've confirmed that the doctor who supposedly signed it never examined my client and has no record of him as a patient." Vivienne's legs seemed to give out slightly, and she grabbed the porch railing for support. "Furthermore," Tom continued, "you're being charged with multiple felonies, including bank fraud, identity theft, forgery of legal documents, and operating an illegal commercial business on property you don't own." One of the Airbnb guests, the woman in designer ski clothes from yesterday, marched over with her phone in hand. "Excuse me, what does this mean for our reservation? We paid $300 a night for this cabin through Christmas." Sheriff Martinez turned to her with professional courtesy. "Ma'am, this property was being rented illegally without the owner's knowledge or consent. You'll need to make alternative arrangements immediately." "Alternative arrangements," she shrieked. "It's Thanksgiving weekend. Do you have any idea how hard it is to find accommodations in the mountains right now?" "That's between you and the person who took your money illegally," Tom replied. "Mr. Whitmore had no knowledge of your reservation and bears no responsibility for your situation." The woman turned to Vivienne with fury. "You told us this was your family's cabin. You said you inherited it from your grandfather. I couldn't help but speak up." "Ma'am, this woman inherited nothing. This is my cabin built by my late wife and me over 20 years ago. She's been stealing rental income and using forged documents to impersonate me." The guest's expression shifted from anger to disgust as she looked at Vivienne. "So we've been staying in a stolen property. We could have been charged as accessories to theft." The college kids from yesterday were loading their cars frantically, clearly wanting no part of whatever legal drama was unfolding. But the couple from the master bedroom approached with their own complaints. "We have a contract," the man said, waving his phone. "We paid through Airbnb. This is breach of contract." Sir Tom explained patiently, "Contracts for illegal activities are void. The person who rented you this property had no legal right to do so. Airbnb will refund your money, but you need to leave immediately." As the reality of the situation sank in, the guests began turning on Vivienne with increasing hostility. They'd been looking forward to luxury mountain vacations, and instead they were being evicted from what was essentially a crime scene. The news crew was capturing everything, the reporter conducting interviews with angry guests, while the cameraman filmed the sheriff serving legal papers. I could already imagine how this would look on the evening news. Local woman charged with elder abuse after running illegal Airbnb in father-in-law's cabin. That's when Jasper's car came speeding up the mountain road. He must have gotten Vivian's panicked phone call, because he jumped out of his vehicle before it had fully stopped his face, a mask of desperation and rage. "Dad, what have you done?" he shouted, storming toward me. Sheriff Martinez stepped between us. "Sir, you need to calm down. This is an active legal proceeding." "This is my father destroying his own family over money," Jasper yelled. "Dad, these are criminal charges. Do you understand what you're doing to us?" I looked at my son, this man I'd raised to be honest and strong, and felt nothing but cold disappointment. "Jasper, I understand exactly what I'm doing. I'm ensuring there are consequences when people steal from their family. We didn't steal from you. We were trying to help you." Tom pulled out his folder of evidence. "Mr. Whitmore, your wife opened 3 fraudulent bank accounts in your father's name, deposited over $30,000 in illegal rental income, and used forged documents to impersonate him. That's not help. That's systematic financial abuse." The news reporter had moved closer, clearly recording our family confrontation for broadcast. I could see Vivienne in the background, crying as she talked on her phone, probably calling lawyers or family members for help. "Dad, please," Jasper begged, his voice breaking. "We have 3 kids. If Vivienne goes to prison, what happens to them? What happens to our family?" For a moment I felt the pull of fatherly love, the instinct to protect my son, even when he'd betrayed me. But then I remembered Margaret's portrait being donated to Goodwill like garbage, remembered the casual way they'd discussed selling my home, remembered being called a confused old man in my own living room. "Jasper, you should have thought about your children before you decided to commit felonies. You should have thought about your family before you chose to steal from your father." Sheriff Martinez approached with handcuffs. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me. You're under arrest for bank fraud and identity theft." As the handcuffs clicked around Vivian's wrists, she looked at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over, you bitter old man. We'll fight these charges. We'll prove you're incompetent." I smiled at her for the first time since this ordeal began. "Vivian, you're welcome to try. But you're fighting a man who spent 40 years running toward danger when everyone else ran away. And now I have the law on my side." The last thing I saw as the sheriff's car drove away was Jasper standing in my driveway, watching his wife disappear into custody, finally understanding that actions have consequences. My cabin was mine again. Justice was being served. And Augustus Whitmore had proven that underestimating an old firefighter was the biggest mistake Vivienne would ever make. 3 weeks later, I sat in the Jefferson County Courthouse, watching my daughter-in-law face the consequences of her crimes. The media attention had been intense. Local news stations had run the story for days, and social media had picked it up as an example of elder abuse that went viral across the country. "Grandmother fights back against family fraud" had been shared thousands of times, though they'd gotten my gender wrong in the headline. The story resonated with people who'd watched their own elderly relatives be taken advantage of by unscrupulous family members. Vivienne sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, flanked by 2 public defenders who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Her bail had been set at $50,000, money that Jasper couldn't raise because all their assets had been frozen pending the investigation. Judge Patricia Hernandez reviewed the case file with the thoroughness of someone who'd seen too many elder abuse cases cross her bench. "Mrs. Whitmore, you've been charged with 14 counts of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. How do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor," Vivienne said, her voice barely audible. Tom Mitchell stood at the prosecutor's table, armed with evidence that had grown even stronger over the past 3 weeks. The FBI investigation had uncovered additional fraudulent accounts, forged documents, and a paper trail showing systematic theft dating back 8 months. "Your Honor," Tom began, "the defendant orchestrated a comprehensive scheme to defraud an elderly man of his property, income, and legal rights. She forged medical documents, opened fraudulent bank accounts, and operated an illegal business on property she didn't own. The evidence shows she stole over $43,000 and was planning to sell the victim's home without his knowledge. $43,000. The number had grown as investigators discovered additional accounts and credit cards opened in my name. Judge Hernandez turned to Vivian's attorney. "How does your client explain the forged power of attorney, Your Honor?" My client was acting in what she believed were the best interests of her father-in-law, who she genuinely believed was suffering from cognitive decline. Counselor, your client never had her father-in-law examined by a qualified physician. She forged medical documents and used them to commit fraud. That's not concern for his welfare. That's criminal conspiracy. I watched Vivian's face crumble as the judge spoke. The confident, controlling woman who'd stood on my porch 3 weeks ago had been replaced by someone who finally understood she couldn't manipulate her way out of federal charges. During the recess, I found myself surrounded by people I hadn't expected to see. Miguel Rodriguez from the fire department had driven up with 3 other retired firefighters. Patricia Williams from my bank had taken time off work to attend. Even some of my neighbors from Denver had made the trip to show support. Gus Miguel said, clapping me on the shoulder, the whole department's been following this story. What she did to you was unforgivable. We're proud of how you handled it, added Captain Stevens, who'd taken over my old station. You showed them that firefighters don't back down from bullies even when they're family. The community support had been overwhelming. Local businesses had offered discounts when they recognized me from the news coverage. Strangers stopped me on the street to share their own stories of elder abuse and to thank me for fighting back. But the person I most wanted to see wasn't there. Jasper had avoided the courthouse, avoided me, avoided taking responsibility for his role in the conspiracy. When court resumed, Judge Hernandez announced her decision. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm sentencing you to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. You'll also pay full restitution of $43,000, plus court costs and damages. Vivian broke down sobbing as the bailiff approached with handcuffs. 18 months in prison, 3 years of probation, and a felony record that would follow her forever. Furthermore, the judge continued, you're permanently banned from any involvement in your father-in-law's financial or property matters. Any future contact must be approved by the court and supervised by probation officers. As they led Vivian away, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction or revenge, but a deep sadness for what my family had become. Outside the courthouse, Tom Mitchell addressed the media crowd that had gathered. This case sends a clear message that elder abuse will not be tolerated in Colorado. Mr. Whitmore's courage in fighting back has protected not just himself, but other elderly citizens who might face similar crimes. A reporter pushed a microphone toward me. Mr. Whitmore, how do you feel about your daughter-in-law's sentence? I thought carefully about my words. I feel sad that it came to this. But I also feel vindicated that the justice system works when elderly people have the courage to stand up for themselves. What about your son? Will you reconcile with him? That was the question I'd been dreading. Jasper hadn't been charged criminally because prosecutors couldn't prove he'd actively participated in the fraud, but the civil lawsuit was still pending. He'd lost his job when his employer learned about the investigation, and his marriage was essentially over with Vivian in prison. My son made choices that led to this moment. If he wants reconciliation, he knows what he needs to do. That evening, I sat on my cabin's porch, watching the sunset over the mountains. Margaret and I had loved so much. The Airbnb equipment was gone. The commercial signage had been removed. My wife's portrait was back above the fireplace, recovered from Goodwill by a kind volunteer who'd recognized it from news coverage. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Jasper's number. Dad. His voice was broken, defeated. Hello, Jasper. Dad, I wanted to apologize for everything. I know sorry isn't enough, but I need you to know that I never wanted it to go this far. But you let it go this far, son. You chose Vivian's plan over your father's rights. I know. I was wrong. Completely wrong. Dad, is there any chance? Can we ever be a family again? I looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The same stars Margaret and I had watched from this same spot for 20 years. Jasper, I spent 40 years teaching people that actions have consequences. You can't undo what you did, but you can choose how to move forward. What does that mean? It means you need to rebuild your life based on honesty instead of shortcuts. It means taking responsibility for your choices instead of blaming circumstances. And it means understanding that trust, once broken, takes years to rebuild. Are you saying there's hope? I thought about my grandson and granddaughter, innocent children, who would grow up with a father marked by felony charges and a mother in prison. Jasper, there's always hope. But hope requires work. Real work. The kind of work I did for 40 years to build the life you tried to steal. After hanging up, I sat in the peaceful silence of my reclaimed home. Augustus Whitmore had fought his last fire, and this time he'd saved himself. 6 months after the courthouse victory, my mountain cabin had been transformed back into the sanctuary Margaret and I had always envisioned. The restoration process had become a form of therapy, each repair erasing another trace of Vivian's violation of our sacred space. I'd hired local craftsmen to refinish the hardwood floors that had been damaged by careless guests. The walls had been repainted in the warm cream color Margaret had chosen decades ago. Every room had been professionally cleaned and blessed by Father Mackenzie from the local Catholic Church, not because I was particularly religious, but because Margaret would have appreciated the gesture. The security improvements were more practical than spiritual. Motion sensor cameras monitored every approach to the property. A new alarm system connected directly to the sheriff's department. The locks had been changed to a keypad system that generated unique codes for each visitor. Never again would anyone enter my home without my explicit permission. But the most meaningful restoration was personal. Margaret's portrait hung above the fireplace, once more professionally cleaned and reframed. Her garden had been replanted with help from the local garden club, whose members had rallied around my story with touching enthusiasm. The women, most of them my age or older, understood the sacred nature of a space built by love and maintained by memory. "Mr. Whitmore," said Eleanor Patterson, the garden club president, as we planted Margaret's favorite roses, "what you did took tremendous courage. You've inspired a lot of us to be more vigilant about protecting ourselves and our assets." The ripple effects of my case had been remarkable. The local senior center now offered monthly seminars on financial fraud prevention. The sheriff's department had created a new elder abuse task force. 3 other families had come forward with similar stories of relatives attempting to steal property through forged documents. My story had even reached the Colorado legislature, where they were drafting new laws to make elder abuse prosecutions easier and penalties more severe. Tom Mitchell had been invited to testify about the need for stronger protections for elderly property owners. "You've become something of a folk hero, Gus," he told me during one of his visits to check on my well-being. "I've had a dozen attorneys call asking for advice on similar cases. You've shown other elderly people that they don't have to be victims." The financial recovery had exceeded expectations. Beyond the $43,000 in direct restitution, the civil lawsuit had resulted in an additional $75,000 in damages for emotional distress, property restoration, and legal costs. Vivian's luxury purchases had been seized and sold, with the proceeds going toward my compensation. More importantly, the fraudulent accounts had been closed, my credit had been restored, and my financial reputation was stronger than ever. Patricia Williams at the bank had implemented additional security measures that would prevent anyone from impersonating me in the future. But the most unexpected gift had been the community that formed around my story. Retired firefighters visited regularly, sharing war stories and checking on my welfare. Neighbors I'd never met stopped by with homemade food and offers to help with property maintenance. The local hardware store refused to let me pay full price for anything, insisting that heroes deserved discounts. "You know, Gus," said Bill Morrison, a retired police officer who'd become a regular visitor. "What you did reminded all of us that we don't have to accept being pushed around just because we're getting older. Age brings wisdom and experience, not weakness." The media attention had gradually faded, but not before my story had reached people across the country who needed to hear it. I received hundreds of letters from elderly people who'd been inspired to stand up to family members attempting similar frauds. Several had successfully stopped theft attempts after learning about the legal resources available to them. One letter particularly moved me. It came from a 74-year-old woman in Florida whose daughter had been stealing from her pension checks for years. "Dear Mr. Whitmore," she wrote, "your story gave me the courage to contact an attorney. My daughter is now facing charges, and I've recovered most of my stolen money. Thank you for showing me that fighting back is possible even when it's family." As spring turned to summer, I established new routines at the cabin. Morning coffee on the porch while watching sunrise over the mountains. Afternoon walks on the trails Margaret and I had hiked together. Evening phone calls with old friends from the fire department who'd become my informal support network. The loneliness I'd expected never materialized. Instead, I found a deep sense of peace that came from knowing I'd protected not just my own interests, but the memory of everything Margaret and I had built together. Jasper had kept his word about rebuilding his life honestly. He'd found work as a construction supervisor using skills I'd taught him decades ago. His divorce from Vivienne had been finalized while she served her prison sentence. Most importantly, he'd been attending counseling to understand how he'd allowed himself to participate in stealing from his own father. "Dad," he said during one of our monthly phone calls, "I know I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know that I'm teaching my kids about integrity, about doing the right thing, even when it's difficult. I'm trying to raise them the way you raised me before I lost my way." Those conversations were still painful, but they offered hope. Trust would take years to rebuild if it could be rebuilt at all. But the possibility existed, and that was more than I'd expected 6 months ago. As autumn returned to the mountains, I sat on my porch one evening, watching the leaves change colors, thinking about the year that had transformed my life. I'd lost a son and daughter-in-law to their own greed and poor choices. But I'd gained something more valuable, the knowledge that Augustus Whitmore was still a man to be reckoned with. Margaret's presence felt strongest during these quiet moments. I could almost hear her voice on the mountain wind, proud of the fight I'd waged to protect our legacy, pleased that her portrait was back where it belonged, satisfied that justice had prevailed. The cabin was mine again. My dignity was restored. And most importantly, I'd proven that age doesn't mean accepting abuse, that family doesn't excuse theft, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold people accountable for their choices. Augustus Whitmore had fought his last fire and emerged victorious. Looking back on this entire ordeal, I've learned that the most important battles we fight aren't always against strangers or external threats. Sometimes they're against the people we love most when they've lost their way and forgotten the values we tried to teach them. The hardest lesson I had to accept was that family doesn't automatically mean loyalty. Blood relationships don't excuse betrayal, and love doesn't mean accepting abuse. For too long, society has taught elderly people that we should be grateful for any attention from our families, even when that attention comes with strings attached or hidden agendas. But here's what I want every person watching this story to understand: your age doesn't make you powerless. Your love for your family doesn't require you to accept their theft. And your desire to keep the peace doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your dignity or your rights. When Vivienne first screamed at me on my own doorstep, calling me an unwelcome old man, she was counting on my shame and confusion to keep me quiet. She believed that elderly people are too proud to admit they've been victimized, too confused to fight back effectively, and too concerned about family reputation to involve law enforcement. She was wrong on every count. The firefighter training that guided me through 40 years of emergencies taught me that the worst disasters happen when people ignore warning signs and hope problems will resolve themselves. Vivienne's disrespect wasn't a one-time outburst. It was the culmination of months of systematic theft and fraud that would have continued indefinitely if I hadn't taken decisive action. To anyone watching this who recognizes similar warning signs in their own life, I want you to know that help is available. Elder abuse hotlines exist in every state. Legal aid societies provide free consultation for seniors facing financial fraud. Law enforcement agencies have specialized units trained to handle these crimes with sensitivity and effectiveness. But most importantly, you have more power than you realize. Your life experience is valuable. Your accumulated wisdom matters. Your right to control your own property and finances doesn't diminish with age. Don't let anyone, not even family members, convince you otherwise. The community support I received after going public with my story showed me something beautiful about human nature. When people see an elderly person standing up for themselves with courage and dignity, they want to help. Neighbors, former colleagues, even strangers rallied around me because my fight represented something they believed in: the idea that respect for elders should be earned through love and care, not taken through manipulation and fraud. Margaret used to say that the measure of a person isn't how they treat those who can help them, but how they treat those who can't fight back. Vivienne and Jasper failed that test spectacularly when they thought I was helpless. But they learned that this old firefighter still had plenty of fight left in him. The reconciliation process with Jasper remains ongoing and uncertain. Trust once broken by betrayal doesn't heal quickly or easily. But I've learned that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting, and love doesn't require ignoring consequences. Real family relationships are built on mutual respect, honest communication, and shared values. If those elements can be rebuilt, then maybe our relationship can be too. If you're an elderly person watching this story, remember that your voice matters, your rights are real, and your dignity is worth fighting for. Don't accept disrespect as the price of family harmony. Don't ignore financial irregularities because you're afraid of causing trouble. And don't let anyone convince you that age makes you incompetent to manage your own affairs. If you're a younger person with elderly family members, remember that the way you treat them today will be remembered long after they're gone. The shortcuts you take, the respect you withhold, the boundaries you cross, these choices have consequences that extend far beyond immediate convenience or financial gain. The mountain cabin where I'm recording this story stands as a testament to what's possible when people work together with love and respect. Margaret and I built this place with our own hands, sustained by dreams of the family gatherings and peaceful retirements it would host. Vivian tried to turn it into a commercial venture, stripping away its meaning and memory for profit. But love and justice prevailed, and it's a home again. That's my message to everyone listening. Never underestimate the power of an elderly person who refuses to be victimized. We've survived decades of challenges, accumulated wisdom from countless experiences, and developed networks of relationships that can be mobilized when needed. We're not helpless victims waiting for younger people to manage our lives. We're experienced fighters who know the value of everything we've built. Augustus Whitmore fought his last fire at the age of 68, and he won. Now I want to hear from you. Have you or someone you know faced similar family betrayals? What lessons have you learned about standing up for yourself when it matters most? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's build a community of people who believe that respect for elders should never be optional. Don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories of courage, justice, and the power of refusing to give up. Until next time, remember that your age is your strength, your experience is your weapon, and your dignity is always worth defending. This story isn't just about one elderly man's fight against family betrayal. It's about the fundamental truth that respect isn't automatically granted based on age, but it's also not automatically lost because of it. Augustus Whitmore's victory represents something deeper than legal justice. It represents the power of refusing to accept that growing older means becoming powerless. In our society, we often see elderly people as burdens rather than resources, as problems to be managed rather than wisdom to be cherished. But Augustus proved that decades of life experience create not weakness but strategic thinking. His firefighter training didn't abandon him at 68. It evolved into a different kind of courage, the courage to fight for dignity when everyone expected him to surrender it. The most profound lesson here is that family love without respect is just manipulation with a prettier name. Real families protect each other's dignity, support each other's independence, and honor the sacrifices made by previous generations. Augustus didn't just save his cabin, he saved his legacy and showed countless other elderly people that they don't have to accept abuse disguised as care. His willingness to hold family accountable, even when it was painful, preserved something more valuable than property. It preserved the principle that every person deserves respect, regardless of their age. Margaret's memory was honored not through passive acceptance, but through active protection of everything they built together. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.